Hi, it's Paul Guppy with the Washington Policy Center, and this is our regular update on issues that are going on in our state that affect all of us. First off, I'd always like to remind our audience to please like, subscribe, and share our videos. As I've mentioned, we have a growing audience, and we love to connect with new people. We get a lot of great comments back on the comments section, talking about how people say this is a great source of information. They haven't seen this site before, and we want to continue to do that outreach. For today, I'm going to hit 4 policy issues, and then I can't resist throwing in a little bit of media commentary as well. So I have a couple of those. But first off, on the policy front is what I call increasing the tax increase. As was predictable, the capital gains income tax is going up from 7% rate to 9.9% rate. Many of you will remember the long fight in this state over the capital gains income tax. Washington Policy Center argued that it is an unconstitutional income tax under our state constitution. Our left-wing state Supreme Court decided that the word income tax doesn't apply. It's an excise tax instead. So they did some wordplay there. But the important part for the rest of us is that now that this tax is in place, guess what? It is starting to expand. So it's supposed to hit only the richest people in our state, and already they've increased the tax rate. We like to point out this pattern because policymakers have a way of slipping a tax in quietly and then letting time go by, and before you know it, more of us are paying it. The tax rate is increasing, and that is certainly happening in this case. The capital gains income tax has already driven some high wealth individuals out of the state. Jeff Bezos moved from Washington state to Florida, which is a no income tax state, and with that one move, the state lost $610 million in tax revenue. Also, the tax tends to be targeted at the Information Technology Center, which is a $52 billion business in our state, and it has over 160,000 workers in Washington state in that tech sector. And the message that the high income capital gains tax sends to investors is high tech is not a friendly place in Washington state. The tech sector hasn't been eaten away yet, but we just see the atmosphere changing there. The other point is that once a tax is in place, it expands, as I mentioned. The key example of that is the federal income tax, which started in the early 1900s. It was pitched as being a tax on the wealthy. The rate was 1%. And today, the top rate is 37%. And of course, most of us have to pay that income tax. So that's the pattern we see happening with the capital gains tax as well. Next up, I wanted to mention a media response. So Fox 13 News had an interview on Tuesday with Superintendent of Public Instruction, Chris Reykdal, talking about, and the news media was using our numbers to explain what's happening with test scores. They're going down while spending is going up. And Reykdal was challenged with this. And the first thing he did was to attack the Washington Policy Center, saying that we were partisan and ideological. But what we noticed he didn't do was actually address the numbers. And guess what? Our information comes from his website. So state spending, or overall spending, has more than doubled in the last 10 or 12 years in public education. We now spend about $21,000 per student, and yet test scores are going down. 60% of well, I'll put it this way. The school districts have failed to educate 60% of kids adequately in math, and they have failed to educate kids adequately in English by 50%. So that means nearly half the students that are in our public education system right now are not learning up to state standards. Superintendent Reykdal's job is to deliver that education that's been promised to kids. When he's challenged with this in a neutral media interview, the first thing he does is push back at the source. Again, what's comical to us is that the source is his office. We're just reporting official numbers. But this follows a pattern that he's engaged in, where he had a years-long running feud with our education expert, Lee Finna, who is now honorably retired. And it looks like he's starting up the same pattern again with Vicki Murray, who is our new education analyst. And again, we're just simply about accountability. We hear public officials say all the time, hold us accountable. We're using your money adequately to provide public services as promised. And when an independent organization like Washington Policy Center comes along and uses official numbers to ask exactly those tough questions, the official in question, in this case, Superintendent Reykdal, gets prickly, he gets nasty, he sets up straw man arguments and is complaining about the source. Well, guess what? He is the source, actually. So I felt like I had to comment on that. Another media item that I'd like to get into is that the Seattle Times is talking about a new education levy that is coming up in Seattle. And the title they have is Littlest Learners Would See Boost in Proposed City Levy. Well, the first thing that struck us was that, no, the littlest learners wouldn't see a boost. It's the adults in the system who would benefit the most from this new $1.2 billion levy. That's how much money gets absorbed into the system before some benefit trickles down to kids in the classroom. For that reason, we support school choice, because under that, funding goes directly to kids, and then parents decide where to access education services. This new levy in Seattle would cost the median homeowner $650 a year. It's a huge increase. That is on top of all the other funding sources that are out there for public education: state, city, special levies, operating, construction. All those add up to the massive billions that are spent on public education right now. Also, the article failed to mention that. So that's my problem with the media, is they don't inform the public about the full context of the money, the revenue sources that are being poured into public education now. I actually noticed in cruising through it that the comment section turned out to be more informative than some of the information that was in the news article. So we think that there should be more accountability in public education, better results for kids, and primarily let parents choose, which would bring competition and discipline to the system. The last point I'll make about this particular media article in the Seattle Times is that it's funded under a project that they have called Education Lab. Education Lab gets its money from the Gates Foundation and the Ballmer Group, which are in favor of passing the levy. So that's hardly unbiased funding sources right there. But the other thing that's disturbing is that those organizations, $1.2 billion is pocket change for them. So instead of using their vast resources to leverage the public to vote for higher taxes, why don't those billionaires just contribute directly to the education system that they support? That would be more honest and direct, and it wouldn't draw down the family incomes of the rest of us at the same time. Moving on to a couple of other issues I want to cover is this last week, both in Seattle and in communities around Washington State, and in fact across the nation, there were these highly touted No Kings protests across the country, protesting against the Trump administration's immigration policy and enforcement. That's all fine. We completely support the right to peaceably assemble. We support free speech. We will be celebrating our country's 250th anniversary next year. And for 2.5 centuries, Americans have been able to peacefully express their views. We support that 100%. The good news about the No Kings protests in Washington State is there was little or no property damage at all, no violence, and no arrests. And that's exactly how people should convey their views. Regarding the substance of it, I was kind of cracking up because of the marketing title that they come up with. No Kings protest. Well, who's in favor of kings? Nobody. It reminded me of the same promotion that was done for the March for Women's Lives years ago. This is kind of a mom and apple pie issue. Who's against women's lives? Nobody. So there's kind of a lack of substance there. On the politics of it, again, the messaging from people who protest, we think that's great. What I think it means more broadly for the Democratic Party is the base is frustrated with the lack of opposition and organization at the national level of Democratic leaders to push back against Donald Trump. As a political analyst, my 2 cents would be for the Democrats, as a functioning opposition party, you're much more effective if you not only protest what's going on, but provide a viable, positive alternative. And that is what we don't hear from the No Kings protests or from what Democrat leaders in general say is, what is your solution? What is your program for immigration in order to offset what the current administration is doing? The public always benefits when it's provided with more rational choices about what direction our country should go in. Next is a similar policy to that, is Washington State is a sanctuary state. Seattle is a sanctuary city. And when you look at what that means is that it puts Seattle and Washington in tension with the federal government. Over time, we're not sure that that's a good thing. What it does is create conflict within our federal system. I think what the public wants is for various layers of government to work together to provide practical solutions. And the other thing is the confusing message that it sends to the public. If Washington state leaders are saying, hey, there are certain laws that we're just not going to enforce, it makes it hard for them to turn around and put the burden on us, the citizens in a democracy, to support the laws that they pass. So when they start to lose their moral authority because they're picking and choosing which laws they're going to enforce, it makes it very hard for them to turn around to the rest of us and say, hey, John Q. Public, you need to follow all the laws. So I feel like saying, you know, there are some taxes I don't feel like paying. My house is going to be a sanctuary house. I don't think that would get me very far, and it shouldn't. So I think that tension is starting to come to the surface. I think that Washington state leaders and Seattle leaders should work in a cooperative way to come to some kind of resolution, but not just simply say, we are a sanctuary area and therefore federal law enforcement isn't going to function there. That undermines our democracy. And then the last issue I'll touch on is what I call government by lawsuit. So I did some quick research and saw that our newly elected Attorney General has already, in the first 5 months of his term, has sued the federal government 21 times on various policy issues that he disagrees with. Disagreeing is fine. If the Attorney General wants to express his views, we think that's important. But to drag the federal government into court every time you have a policy disagreement, we think works against the interests of our state. It consumes public resources in the criminal justice system that could be used for public safety instead of suing the president. And we also think it doesn't resolve any of these issues, because to have the courts set policy for our country is creating tension. It's preventing the executive from operating to enforce the law. And our Attorney General is just contributing to that confusion. It also feeds into the fact of, if you're going to sue, then you're going to get sued. And Washington has a separate problem regarding lawsuits that have been filed against the state have skyrocketed. In the last fiscal year, the state is paying out $502 million in settlements and $56 million in legal fees just to settle the many dozens, thousands of lawsuits that have been filed against the state. That should be resolved based on its merits. People do have good claims against mismanagement and harm that's been caused by government officials, particularly in the foster care system. Those are injustices that need to be resolved. But in general, if the Attorney General says, my policy is to sue people that I'm opposed to, don't be surprised if you create an atmosphere in which other people begin to think, okay, well then I'm going to sue you. And I think that pattern is developing as well. So those are some of the issues that we're tracking. We're hoping that things get in a more positive direction with our state, more cooperative with different levels of government. But with that, I will wrap it up, and I'll be back next time with another update. Thanks a lot.
If you found this informative, share it with a friend and consider checking out one of our suggested videos over here. Make sure you're subscribed so that you can stay up to date with the latest policy news from Washington.